to our channel, where we set out to explore wonderful, great works
of
literature whilst elegantly dressed.
Well dressed in elegant clothing.
It's been a while since we've done this.
Because...
Why the hell not?
Okay, well after that funny introduction.
Yeah, so we've been incredibly busy. And I think we've been taking a break from the heavy lifting classics to maybe still heavy lifting. But
yeah, if you look at the amount.
Quite the number.
It's very satisfying.
Yeah.
To lift them.
And I think, so this is the, I guess what would you call it? An Erast Fandorin Mystery. So this is something a little bit, I don't know, sometimes we enjoy mysteries, but this is contemporary. This is out of sort of the general sort of era in which we generally like to read our literature. And so this one is actually produced by a Georgian from Georgia, not the state.
And how do you say his name, the author's name?
Yeah, it's Grigory. My goodness, it's always a tricky one. It's so the actual name here is Boris Akunin. And what's very interesting is if you take the B and then say the last name, it actually spells out Bakunin, who was a very famous Russian anarchist in the 19th century. He had a whole philosophy about sort of political anarchy. But the actual author's name is Grigory Chkhartishvili. I probably butchered that name. But I think sometimes he lives in Moscow, sometimes he lives in London. So there's a very interesting, I guess, flavor to a lot of these novels. They're kind of like Sherlock Holmes, a little bit of Poirot, meets Agatha Christie, meets sort of Russian imperial Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Gogol and these types of writers. So there's a British flavor, English flavor to a lot of these stories too, and some of them are actually set back and forth into London as well. So it really starts off with The Winter Queen, and this is set in 1876, and so Erast Petrovich Fandorin, whose full name is Erasmus, he's a young recruit, and he works for the sort of the criminal investigation department. And I find one of the things I found very tricky about reading this book was all the different titles. So they have a whole, very helpful in the first book, an entire table of ranks for the civil hierarchy and the military hierarchy.
Yeah, he does a good job of kind of explaining the difference between the two here and there.
Yeah, and he gives a little bit of like sort of the history and the organization. So I think it's also like he's taking a lot of historical elements too and incorporating into his novels. But they're always fun and easy breezy, fun to read.
If you like Poirot and you like Sherlock Holmes, I think you'd really be interested.
You'd appreciate these.
Yeah. There's all the things that make up a really great mystery novel, which is a really strong, interesting, many sides to his character. Erast Petrovich Fandorin. So really lovable main character.
And it unfolds though. His character unfolds over time.
Yeah.
So he's not static. It's not like he's like, it's been compared to like James Bond sometimes aspects of it where he does do karate. He has a servant named Masa who's a Japanese.
He lives in Japan for a period of time.
Speaks Japanese.
And believes in taking some of that culture back home with him, which is really interesting.
Yeah. But he's not one-sided like James Bond. I find you don't really, he's kind of very...
Yeah. And he goes through his own like loss and grief process too, which changes his character on the way, as well as having had a concussion. So he has a concussion that also changes and shapes his character a bit more.
And he stutters. Yeah,
and then you start to see these different aspects of like his personality come out, even in how he solves mystery. He tends to then end up impersonating a bit more later on in the series, whereas in the beginning he was very much more of a not simple, but more of the detective face, and then later on
he's a master of disguise.
He's a master of disguise, but there's this element too, which is really cool, where he really embodies that character from almost like an empathetic lens too. So it's he's not a judgmental character,
right? But he's not judgmental, but he's also like very methodical.
Yeah,
he likes to number things logically, but like he still has, besides his cold reserve and elegant demeanor and like very like aloof, he's also very warm-hearted and very humane.
Yeah, like he goes out of his way to make sure people feel safe and are safe.
Yeah.
From multiple levels. There's also one of the things we really love about it is there's also always pretty dynamic female leads throughout the whole book, whole series. Sorry,
Yeah.
so that's pretty fun. So you don't really get one flavor of a female either. Like there's the sleuth female, there's the mastermind female, there's the femme fatale female.
Yeah.
There's just the regular old female. Like there's
regular old female. Yeah. That's crucial.
I guess
in any
maybe
plot.
none of us are regular old females,
That's
are
hilarious.
we? But you know what I mean, like ones that are all dynamic and non-dynamic.
Yeah.
So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, and the settings vary. So each book feels rather fresh or feels rather new. One's set in an ocean liner, and there's a mystery to be solved. One was originally set on a train. It's kind of, and again, it evokes that sort of nostalgia for those sort of the golden age of detective stories. But obviously in imperialist Tsarist Russia. So it right now, I think the last book we just finished was She Lover of Death, and it's set in 1900. And what I liked particularly about the one we just finished was the fact that it kind of incorporates the historical period of the Silver Age of Russian poetry. And so there was that decadent movement happening at that time, the poets. And in this particular story, there's almost like this suicide club, essentially.
Yeah. But it also shows like this kind of new interest in the spiritual realm that we saw throughout that period of time, where people are starting to really dabble with Ouija boards and seances and things like that, which I don't know about anyone else if you're into mysteries, but that's kind of, I love that there's a cozy element to that. And you know, and he also, again, like a lot of people authors during that period of time, dabble with this idea of it. Is this all a sham? Or is there elements of truth there?
I think an element of that is like, because the scientific sort of revolution, right? And carried over into 19th century materialism, people were seeing sort of the frontiers of science kind of blending in with these spiritualist movements or these occult ideas and philosophies. And so there was a sense in which, you know, science, where can science bring us, perhaps? Like maybe it could allow us to speak to the dead and converse with death itself, or something like strange like that. So anyway, it was these stories are very cozy.
They're very cozy.
Very fun.
And they're not I don't know about you, but some mystery series or even, you know, movies or TV shows that we watch, ends up being like too much of a predictability to it. It's like, oh, it's gonna be the maid again, or or you know, it's either the person you least expect or the person you most expect will be the killer. And this, it's like you never really know if it's going to be a simplistic ending or a more complicated, convoluted ending. And not just that, but it's also how he writes. The narratives always are changing, whether it's just purely him as the narrative, whether it's multiple characters telling their narrative, like on the one on the ship. It's
very unique sort of narrative structures.
He plays with that a lot, which is fun, because you never know which novel is going to be. Some are really dark.
Some are quite
that are
scary.
heavy and really quite dark, and then some are the opposite, completely light and quite humorous. So it's again, it kind of, if you find one book doesn't really suit your fancy, don't give up on it if you kind of like the way he writes, because there's all different plots throughout the series.
Exactly. And like, to your point, like the Turkish Gambit, I found was the most sort of potentially historical, political, in the sense that it was, a lot of it was like on the battlefield, a lot of it was espionage regarding sort of the Russo-Turkish War. And if you don't really know what's really happening historically in the background, you might be a little bit lost, confused. It may not be as interesting. And I found for us, maybe that was not
more for me.
Well, even for me, it wasn't the most interesting out of them. I do like that sort of the aesthetics and sort of being in a small confined spaces with one or two sort of suspicious things going on. But like that one to me was a little bit boring, if I may say. But generally, these are worth reading.
Even that one was worth reading. It was still really fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And one thing I like, online you'll find two different publishers who make the book covers. But this one, if you can get your hands on
Okay,
these
I'm gonna
ones,
zoom in a little bit.
they're actually really wonderful. I really love the illustrations. And I've been kind of like setting myself up to find exactly these. Yeah, it was just showing.
Just the covers are really, you want to pick them up. They're enticing and they look nice on a shelf too. So there's a
Yeah.
bonus.
Exactly, and they're wonderfully colorful too. So that adds to the appeal. So yeah, I guess we could rate this then.
Sure.
Yeah, and
Is
so
there anything else you want to mention? Or?
I don't
Just
think-
I think the aesthetics too. Like that's the only other thing I want to mention is like there's always this like alluring aesthetic that he presents both in his main character but also in all of the settings. There's an attention to detail that I think is often missing in today's literature.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have a modern author that still has a lot of the essence from the classics that we enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, the small details that and the language that's a little bit more. It's not complicated by any means, but it's descriptive in a floral and like enticing way.
Yeah.
That's all I
would totally agree.
Yeah.
So out of 5, how would you rate the series as a whole? Not each book, but
I think honestly 4.9. I really loved it.
Yeah, I would give it 4.9 as well. I think it's well worth the investment of time. And if you can get these at the local library, that's wonderful too. I'm sure we have a local bookstore, and they said these are incredibly popular, and people are always on the lookout for the next edition. But one thing I should mention before we, jump out here, or jump off, is that I didn't know this, but he's still producing some of the books. I thought that he had finished the series, but now he's moving on to Masa's perspective.
Oh, that's so
in
fun.
Japan.
So Masa
Japanese.
is his. That's the other thing I wanted to mention is he has an awesome sidekick who's this like Japanese man who's so devoted to him, and so having lived in Japan, there's a lot of the culture that is also tied in here that is represented through Masa, and that's really fun for me or for anyone who loves Japan. It's also really cool.
They have a funny relationship. Was he a samurai, Masa?
I think he's from a samurai class.
Yeah. But anyway, it's always very amusing, and it's also quite fun because apparently we found this out. The actual author himself actually translates Japanese, and he's very well versed in Japanese culture. So he's not just making this up. So it's really a fun series and definitely well worth your time. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we will
us.
see you next time. Take care for now.